At 2:25 in the morning on November 28, 1953, a man fell from the 13th floor of the Hotel Statler in Midtown Manhattan. His name was Frank Olson. He was a government scientist, a father of three, a man who had spent the last decade of his life working in classified biological research at a military installation in Maryland. The CIA said he jumped. His family said he was pushed. For 22 years, his wife Alice was told her husband had suffered a nervous breakdown from work stress. That was the official explanation. That was what the United States government told her. 9 days before he fell, Frank Olson's colleagues had put something in his drink. He didn't know it. He was never supposed to know. To understand what was done to Frank Olson, you need to understand what the Central Intelligence Agency believed in 1953. The Korean War had been running for 3 years. American prisoners of war were appearing in Chinese and North Korean propaganda films, confessing to crimes they had not committed, denouncing the United States in voices that did not sound entirely their own. Back in Washington, intelligence analysts had a word for what they were seeing: brainwashing. In 1950, this was not a metaphor. It was a genuine intelligence panic. The Soviet Union was believed to have developed some combination of drugs, hypnosis, and psychological techniques that could override a person's will. The CIA believed the United States was behind. And the CIA was not the kind of institution that accepted being behind. They already had 2 classified programs. Project Bluebird had started in 1950. It became Project Artichoke in 1951. Both asked the same questions: can the human mind be controlled? Can a man be made to reveal secrets he wants to keep? Can a person be conditioned to carry out an act they would never otherwise commit? The research suggested yes. On April 13, 1953, CIA Director Alan Dulles signed the formal authorization. A new program would consolidate everything that had come before and go further. It would be called MKUltra. Heading it was a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. Gottlieb had been born in the Bronx, the son of Hungarian Jewish immigrants. He had a club foot. He had a stutter. He had compensated for both with a ferocious academic drive, a chemistry doctorate from Caltech, a mind that thought in systems. He joined the CIA in 1951. By 1953, he was running the chemical division of the technical services staff. His brief under MKUltra was simple: find the chemicals that unlock the human mind. There was no budget ceiling he was aware of. There was no ethical review board. There was no oversight in any meaningful sense. The program was classified at a level that placed it beyond the reach of normal institutional constraints. What Gottlieb built was not one experiment. It was 149 sub-projects, spread across 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons, military installations. Some of the names would be familiar to anyone who studied psychology or medicine. Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, Columbia, McGill. The subjects were soldiers, prisoners, mental patients, and members of the public. None of them had been told they were part of anything. The primary tool was lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. The CIA had acquired a large supply from Sandoz laboratories in Switzerland, where the compound had first been synthesized in 1938. They believed it could be the key to everything. A truth serum. A disorienting agent that could be delivered to enemy leadership through water supplies or ventilation systems. A compound that might, in the right dose and the right context, make a person permanently compliant. Gottlieb dosed strangers. He dosed colleagues. He dosed prisoners. He dosed psychiatric patients who had come to hospitals seeking help. No one gave consent. In San Francisco, the CIA rented an apartment on Telegraph Hill, 225, Chestnut Street, decorated to look like a seedy residential hotel. A federal narcotics agent named George Hunter White installed one-way mirrors. Women who worked as CIA assets invited men from nearby bars back to the apartment. The men received drinks that had been spiked with LSD without their knowledge. George White and CIA observers watched from behind the glass and made notes. This operation ran for nearly 10 years. In his personal diary, White later described his work in the program as fun. The most prolonged and destructive experiments happened not in San Francisco, but in Montreal, Canada. At the Allen Memorial Institute of McGill University, a psychiatrist named Donald Ewan Cameron was conducting what he called depatterning. Cameron was not a fringe figure. He was, at the time of his experiments, the president of the American Psychiatric Association. He was one of the most credentialed psychiatrists in the world. His patients came to him with depression, anxiety, marital difficulties. They came because they trusted him. Cameron kept them unconscious. Using combinations of LSD, PCP, and barbiturates, he maintained patients in a chemically induced sleep, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for up to 86 consecutive days. While they slept, he played tape loops into their ears, thousands upon thousands of repetitions of the same message, running for 16 hours a day. He then administered electroconvulsive therapy at 30 to 40 times the standard therapeutic dose. Some patients received 360 ECT treatments. The theory was that he could erase a human being and write something new in the space that remained. It did not work. What remained was not a blank space. Men and women woke from Cameron's care unable to remember their children's names. Unable to walk without assistance. Some had lost decades of their own lives, their memories simply gone. A woman who had entered the clinic complaining of anxiety left it as an adult who had to be taught, again, how to tie her shoes. Cameron died in 1967 of a heart attack while mountain climbing. He never faced legal consequences. The scale of what MKUltra reached is difficult to hold in your mind all at once. 44 universities. 15 research foundations. 12 hospitals and clinics. 3 federal penitentiaries. Soldiers dosed in Europe under a sub-project called Operation Third Chance. Prisoners in American penitentiaries told they were volunteering. Indigenous children in Canada. Black prisoners in the United States. The common thread, people who had the least power to refuse or protest. And at the center of all of it was Sidney Gottlieb, goat farmer, folk dancer, yoga practitioner, who filed the paperwork, signed the approvals, and went home. We return now to the man who fell. On November 19, 1953, a group of government scientists gathered at a cabin at Deep Creek Lake in the mountains of western Maryland. They were told it was a routine work retreat. Frank Olson was among them. He was 43 years old. His children were young. He had worked at Fort Detrick, Camp Detrick, as it was then called, for years, on biological research he could not discuss with his family. That evening, Gottlieb's deputy, a CIA officer named Robert Lashbrook, opened a bottle of Cointreau and passed it around the group. He had put something in it. Frank Olson did not know what had been given to him. He would never know. Over the hours and days that followed, he began to come apart. He became paranoid. Agitated. He could not sleep. He told his wife Alice that something was wrong, not what, only that he was not himself, that something had happened that he could not explain. He was brought to New York City to see a psychiatrist named Harold Abramson, a CIA-connected doctor who was himself a participant in MKUltra research. They checked into the Hotel Statler, Lashbrook and Olson sharing a room. For 9 days, Frank Olson oscillated between distress and an uneasy, medicated calm. He called Alice. He seemed better. Then he seemed worse. He did not know that the men around him were not his colleagues attending to his well-being. He was their subject. He had been their subject from the moment Lashbrook passed the bottle. In the hours after 2 a.m. on November the 28th, Frank Olson went through a window. Robert Lashbrook was in the room. Lashbrook's first call was not to emergency services. It was to Harold Abramson. The CIA's official account said Olson had run at the closed window in his sleep, crashing through the glass and the shade, and fallen 13 floors to the sidewalk below. The cause of death was recorded as suicide. Alice Olson was told her husband had suffered a nervous breakdown. She was not told about the Cointry. She was not told about the LSD. She was not told about Deep Creek Lake. She was not told any of this for 22 years. In 1975, the Rockefeller Commission and the Church Committee, Investigations into CIA Misconduct, surfaced the name Frank Olson. Gerald Ford, President of the United States, invited the Olson family to the White House. He apologized, personally, to Alice and to her children. CIA Director William Colby provided documents. What the government did not provide was an explanation for what had happened in that hotel room. It apologized for the dosing. It said nothing about the fall. In 1994, Eric Olson, Frank's son, who had spent his adult life consumed by this question, arranged for his father's body to be exhumed. A forensic scientist from George Washington University named James Starrs led the examination team. They found a wound on Frank Olson's left forehead, a blunt force contusion, a hematoma, consistent with a blow to the head. There was no glass in the wound. There was no evidence that Frank Olson had gone headfirst through a closed window. Starrs described the evidence as rankly and starkly suggestive of homicide. The case has never been officially reclassified. Frank Olson's death remains, in the record, a suicide. In January 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the MKUltra files destroyed. He was leaving office. This was not an accident or an oversight. This was an institution deciding, deliberately and methodically, to erase 20 years of evidence. The files were shredded. The records of what had been done, to whom, in what doses, with what results, gone. Except, in 1977, an employee of the CIA's Office of Technical Services was going through an archive and found 7 boxes of records that had been misfiled in a budget office. The boxes had been in the wrong drawer. They had been in the wrong building, in the wrong section, filed under the wrong category. They escaped the 1973 destruction because someone had made a clerical error. Inside, 20,000 pages of MKUltra financial records. Invoices. Payment vouchers. Project summaries. Fragmentary documentation of 149 subprojects. This is the entire historical record of MKUltra that we have. Not because it is all that existed, it is the fraction that was misfiled. Everything else is gone. What we know about this program, we know because of a filing mistake. On August 3, 1977, Senator Edward Kennedy chaired a subcommittee hearing in Washington. CIA Director Stansfield Turner took the oath. He acknowledged, for the first time in a public forum, that the Central Intelligence Agency had conducted experiments on unwitting human subjects. He acknowledged MKUltra. He read from the recovered documents. A word appeared again and again in his testimony. Unwitting. The subjects, Turner said, were unwitting. As if ignorance were an administrative category. As if being told nothing was simply a feature of the study design, rather than a crime carried out against real people. Turner did not say Frank Olson's name. He did not say James Thornwell's name. Thornwell was a black American soldier stationed in France in 1961, who was accused, without evidence, of stealing classified documents. He was subjected to 99 days of interrogation, including racial abuse. He was then secretly dosed with LSD under an MKUltra subproject called Operation Third Chance. He was told, while the drug was active in his system, that he might be insane. He spent the rest of his life suffering the psychological consequences of what had been done to him. Congress issued a formal apology to Thornwell in 1980. It paid him $625,000. He died in 1984. He was never the same. Sidney Gottlieb retired from the CIA in 1972, 1 year before the files were destroyed. A federal grand jury investigated him in the late 1970s. The investigation went nowhere. No charges were brought. No trial. No prison. He spent his remaining years on a farm in rural Virginia. He grew vegetables. He raised goats. He attended folk dancing circles. He gave occasional interviews in which he described his work at the CIA in general terms, as service to his country during a dangerous time. He expressed regret for specific incidents. Not for the program. Sidney Gottlieb died on March 7, 1999. He was 80 years old. He died in his own bed, of natural causes, on his own farm. There are no charges on his record for anything done under MKUltra. In 2014, the Senate Intelligence Committee released its report on the CIA's Postal 9/11 Enhanced Interrogation Program. The techniques documented in that report, sleep deprivation, sensory isolation, stress positions, the systematic dismantling of a person's sense of time and self, are the same techniques that MKUltra had developed, refined, and documented 40 years earlier. The CIA cited MKUltra-era research in its internal justifications. The program did not end. It took a 30-year pause. In 2024, a court in Quebec authorized a class-action lawsuit on behalf of surviving victims of Cameron's Montreal experiments and their families. The defendants include the Canadian government, McGill University, and the Royal Victoria Hospital. Some of Cameron's patients who are still alive are now in their 80s and 90s. They still do not know who they were before they walked into his clinic. We began with Frank Olson. We end with Frank Olson. Eric Olson, Frank's son, is still alive. He has spent his entire adult life asking one question: was his father murdered? The official answer is, we do not know. The case has been reopened and closed again. The 1994 forensic evidence is in the record. The skull fracture is documented. The absence of glass in the wound is documented. What is not documented, what was shredded in January of 1973, is whatever the CIA knew about what happened in that hotel room. In April 2026, declassified documents confirmed for the first time that the Central Intelligence Agency had conducted MKUltra experiments on American prisoners of war from the Korean conflict. More than 70 years after the program began, the disclosures are still arriving. There are 149 documented subprojects. The recovered records cover fragments of their scope. We do not have the experimental results. We do not have the names of all the subjects. Richard Helms was thorough. What we know is what was misfiled. The question the 7 boxes could not answer, and the question that still has no answer, is what the boxes that were burned would have told us. If you want to go deeper on the stories the government tried to bury, follow this channel. There is more to come.